There are no limits here at the Romantic School of Music, and each lesson is taught as though it really is your goal to become the greatest virtuoso who has ever lived. Yet, no matter what your ultimate goal is, give this lesson a real chance. Then feel free to take or leave anything. After all, we are each unique. That's what the audience wants. And when it comes to right or wrong, don't forget that each of the great masters knowingly chose to break different rules for different reasons. So choose for yourself who you are and what you want to become. And remember that the real goal of this lesson is to inspire you to greatness by giving you fresh ideas so that you can discover how you can succeed. My sponsor paid the master $600 for this lesson in 1979, and I now offer it to you for free. But before I begin, I apologize for not completing this video sooner. You see, even though I didn't make another YouTube video, I did break my spine again this past year. And because of my operations, pinched nerves, and extensive therapy, I haven't been able to practice more than about 20 hours each year for the past 10 years. And most of that time playing was spent making these how-to videos. But I am now finally able to hold a violin bow for more than just a few minutes, and I believe that I am now able to practice seriously again. As far as my solo career is concerned, I might as well be starting over. But I also think of it as being given a second chance. The good news is that starting over is a highly recommended thing to do at the Romantic School of Music, at least once in your life. So, whether you're a beginner, a lifelong professional, or somewhere in between, let's get started together and bring the music to life. Preferably one that you have never heard before, and fall in love with it. It should be short and within your current playing ability. For beginners, this could be the first song in your lesson book that actually speaks to you. For accomplished musicians, make it a true treasure hunt. For my own starting over, I decided to dig through the archives here at the Romantic School of Music until I found a beginner's book that I had never seen before. Yes, it's a little cheesy, but doesn't the picture of the instructor have an alluring charm to it? But don't judge a book by its cover, and don't judge that one special piece that could change your life forever by all the other songs around it. There will come a time when you need to bring songs to life that are not your cup of tea. But before you can master those, you must master at least one that you love. If a piece loses its charm along the way, don't be afraid to start over, at least for this lesson. And don't force anything. This lesson is different. The searching process is called fishing, and you are looking for the granddaddy of all fish. Or, in the words of the old prospector, you are digging for the mother lode. So be extra critical and wait for just the right one. You may love or hate this piece, you're allowed that, but Strida La Vampa touched my soul within the first few bars. After you've decided on your piece, make yourself a large, clean working copy. You can do this by hand, use music software, or a scanner, photo editor, and a printer. But regardless of your technique, bigger is usually better. And make sure you have some extra pages with blank staff lines to go with it. Once you have these, mount the music to a hard, smooth board. Marking music should be a pleasure, not a pain or distraction. And even if your piece requires a larger board or multiple music stands, make sure that you don't have to turn any pages. It's amazing how hiccups from turning pages in the middle of a movement can stay with you forever. If you want to become a master, start acting like one right now, and use this lesson to perfect the art of practicing. Whether it's the right room, the right lights, the right pencil, or even the perfect fingernail clipper, always within your reach. These early efforts in getting set up properly will pay for themselves 100 times over. Clear your mind of everything else and make it personal. Tease it, caress it, play it fast, play it slow. Use wide vibrato, narrow vibrato, no vibrato. Slur it, syncopate it, spiccato, martelé, pizzicato. Do everything. And like the rebellious teenager who has fallen in love with someone rather wicked, ignore everything that you've ever been taught and have as much fun as possible. Regardless of how technically or traditionally perfect you plan on performing your piece later on, this step will help make the music uniquely yours. It's also an important step toward composing and writing your own cadenzas. Even if you end up writing an entirely new piece off to the side, at least for this lesson, go for it. But, as a caution, for classical performances, you may wish to reverse the order of this step with the next. Find out what the piece is supposed to be. Use a metronome and perfect it in the accepted traditional manner. A couple good starting places for your research are Wikipedia and YouTube. But then dig a little deeper and see if there are, or ever have been, better or more complete versions. This step is where I found that the ending of Strida la Vampa had been entirely left out of the Howard instructor. In rather poor taste, I might add. In fact, as it's written, it's an endless loop. After purchasing the operatic score, I also learned that Strida la Vampa means fierce flames are soaring, and is sung by the gypsy girl Azucena, who watched as her mother was burned at the stake. There is quite often much more to a song than meets the eye, and I can now go back to step 2 and add the proper, and by the way, very passionate ending. If you think these kinds of revelations are unusual for music, just do the research on Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Not only was it originally written in a much better key, add a few slurs to Mozart's variations, and it actually becomes music. Now, bring the two versions together. Usually your goal would be to blend your original interpretation with the traditional version in a way that best fulfills the audience. But, just for this lesson, balance it in a way that best fulfills you. But looking forward, a true virtuoso will master both versions. So if an audience is not responding to their performance, they can call upon their original variations to liven things up a bit, or change the mood. And sometimes it doesn't take much. For it is not the audience's obligation to appreciate your perfect performances. It is up to you as the virtuoso to fulfill their dreams. There have always been teachers and critics that demand that you only perform pieces in the accepted traditional manner. Yet if you actually do your research, you will find that the original versions, as composed by the original masters, were nothing like most of the versions we have today. So when you think about it, why not your version? And to make sure to set unrealistic goals. Dream of what the music actually could be, and dream that you can accomplish it. Dream of the toughest, most cynical crowd, then begging to give you everything they own if you will just play one more note. Unrealistic goals might also include making members of the audience weep within the first few bars. Make them laugh out loud. Make them believe it is magic. Make them into your closest friends. Make them into your lovers. Shock them. Slap them. Take their breath away. Make them pass out in ecstasy, like Paganini did, and then have them carried away on stretchers. And dream of being able to raise them back up and lure them through the streets of the city, like the Pied Piper of Hamelin. You get the idea. Imagine everything that the legends talk about, and believe that you are the one who can actually do it. This all is, of course, impossible to most, and farther than most performers can ever go. Yet, this is just the beginning. In order to fulfill dreams and to succeed as a virtuoso, you must first experience all of the emotions for yourself. In fact, you must over-experience some of them if you want the audience to believe you. Yet always keep in mind that on stage, you must be able to share these emotions in a professional, sellable manner. So let's get started. You may want to add pictures and props around your practice music. Anything that helps you get into the mood. Nothing is too outlandish or childish, though keep in mind that one simple item is sometimes enough to inspire and accomplish everything. Now let's take the next step and really try to get into it. For Baroque, you might also dress the part, visit a museum, talk the talk and walk the walk, powder your face and wear a white wig, put gut strings on your instrument and practice with a Baroque bow, use a harpsichord instead of a piano for your accompaniment. Try experiencing everything and anything that might relate to your piece, and never rule out the possibility that you could actually use some or all of these things in your performances. If you think I'm kidding, you may wish to think again. That is, if you do wish to change the world with your music. So get as close to the real McCoy as you possibly can. Don't give me excuses. Get results. If your resources are truly limited, you may have to dream a little more than others. And like the book Two Trees, at least talk to someone who has experienced it. Greatness rubs off, so go rub yourself up against it. If your piece is a love song, fall in love, madly in love. If you're only 5, try My Little Pony. If a fiddle tune tickles your fancy, put on some steel strings, go to a square dance, spend some time on a farm, listen to the roosters, milk the cows, visit a porch in the Ozarks and play a duet with a banjo. Race cars, paint paintings, shoot cannons, jump out of an airplane with a parachute. Make it a point to live your life with so much emotion and flavor that you have more than enough to spare. And try to relate everything you do in life with your music. This is how the masters can play music like no one else. But also beware, there have been students who have taken this philosophy too far and lived and died to regret it. So learn from others' mistakes, and in your search for inspiration, don't do anything that will hurt anyone, and don't do anything that you will regret later. At least too much. The proper balance of experience and imagination is probably close to that of Anne of Green Gables. And remember that it's one thing to lie in the bottom of a boat. It's another to do it for your music. If you haven't noticed, the terms musical piece and song are used interchangeably at the Romantic School of Music. This is because most of the masters have taught that you cannot master any violin piece without singing it first. If you have chosen your song wisely, you will probably find that you are already singing it, without even trying. But if not, you may need to loosen up a bit, or possibly even choose another piece. So sing, and notice where the nuances and extra emotions come in. Notice where you breathe, and how the notes swell. Words can add a whole extra dimension to the music, but for many pieces, la 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 is just as good. The good news is, it almost doesn't matter how bad your natural voice is, just lose your inhibitions and be sincere. In the Old West, the saying was that God created men, but Samuel Colt made them equal. The beauty of playing the violin is that you and I are no longer limited by the natural voices that we were born with. We have the violin. This step plunges deep into the heart of the lesson, and what makes this whole lesson so valuable. The Virtuoso's extended markings will not only give you the ability to add any emotion to your music and bring it to life, they can, as if by magic, perfect your performances. Yet to the virtuoso, these extended markings are not magic, they are common sense. To the virtuoso, pianissimo, crescendo, decrescendo, pizzicato, and accelerando all feel like a ball and a chain on a prisoner's leg. It's like saying, you're a loud person, or you're a quiet one. Nothing about what makes you special. Nothing about your past or future. Nothing about whether that note represents a young black man with dreams of becoming a poet, or an old French woman on her deathbed. So let's make an extra copy without any markings and begin with the very first note. And by the way, I do agree with Giuseppe Verdi. Strida la Vampa is the sad lament of a tormented gypsy woman. So I probably won't be making many changes, yet always go through the full process for each note. The first note is B natural. As written, it's a dotted quarter with an accent down to pianissimo. Standard rules dictate that it be played with the first finger in the first position, with a down bow, because it is the first note and it is a full measure. And it should also be started in the middle of the bow, because of its volume, duration, and the length of the note following it. And this might be enough, but never, ever assume that it's enough for any note. For instance, what if Azucena was weeping and struggling to breathe? Instead of a plain accent, what if we could dictate the first note to be out of breath by the technique of brushing the bow over the fingerboard at the end? Or instead, if Azucena began angrily, how about giving the note some extra bite at the beginning by adding a staccato dot toward the left side? Or better yet, by modifying the accent mark itself with small vertical lines. And to increase the bite even more, make the lines themselves angry. And even though the sound can turn ugly, designate the bite last well into the timing of the note itself. What if Azucena begins by wailing or moaning? Who says that the lines have to be straight? Are they a master? Because the masters have always taught that there should be no limits to the shape of your dynamics. And what about vibrato? Do you really believe that a virtuoso would ever leave vibrato to chance? Or use the same vibrato for every note? Of course not. A virtuoso controls everything. How wide, how fast, and how it develops through the life of the note. As we proceed, these markings can get pretty messy, and there are some who can perfect and memorize a piece in this manner with only a few simple markings. But if you're not naturally gifted, like me, you may wish to pick up a set of colored pencils to expand your options and help separate the different characteristics. For instance, should I play this particular note with clean intonation? I say, yes, I should. And every note should be played with clean intonation unless otherwise marked. Yet sometimes a straight blue line, blue always signifying pitch, can also be used to remind you about a problematic note that tends to slurp up at the end when it precedes a shift, as this one does. On the other hand, if we do wish to bring the pitch up or down, mark it that way. And if the mood and style of the piece remains fairly constant, just place one mark at the beginning of the piece and then note the exceptions to it along the way. Or the places where you do need a little reminding. Whatever you decide to do it with confidence and then write it down so you can perfect it. And when you just can't think of the right marking, write the description out longhand. This is where the extra space around the music comes in handy. Or draw pictures. Or add photographs. Anything to remind you of the mood and the dynamics that apply. And the list goes on. Where to start your bow and exactly how far to draw it. Where to place the bow between the bridge and fingerboard and then beyond it. Variations on timing, nuances of style, how fast to trill, and the many variations of a turn. And when you think you might be through, then add comments about posture, facial expressions, and your own movements or gestures that can enhance each note or phrase. Never limit yourself just because everyone else does. Take every marking that you have ever heard of and expand each one until every last note has full range and meaning. The real secret here isn't in the particular markings themselves. It's that once there are no limits and you begin experimenting with the true potential of every last note, every note will suddenly begin to come to life. In order to mark a piece properly, you must first practice it enough to finalize everything and get the kinks out. This allows you to then practice it correctly. And yes, rule number 1 is to always practice everything more times correctly than you have incorrectly. This is a simple concept and just plain common sense once you think about it. But it is amazing how many times a student will struggle with a passage 100 times, finally get it right once, then believe that they are finished. It has also been the creed of masters to practice the most difficult parts of a piece until they become the very best. If you do decide to practice for long periods of time, which so many nowadays preach against, do it right. Keep it fresh. Move around. Make multiple copies and practice it in different places. And if you do have the option, trade off with different violins and even bows. Paganini had more than a dozen. And yes, you can choose to look like a demon on stage, but never allow poor posture or a bad attitude to ever creep in while you're practicing. Otherwise, practicing will do you more harm than good. So here we go. To effectively practice as much as 17 hours a day, you must love it, live it, and build up to it gradually. Don't keep playing when your fingertips are raw. Instead, practice against the back of your hand. If your chin starts becoming sore, put something soft and soothing under it. And when you feel like you just can't go on any longer, don't. Instead, sing the names of each note. Work out the dynamics and fingerings in your mind. If your back gets sore, trade off between sitting and standing. And do stretches and physical exercises. These are all part of practicing. But never, ever practice for long hours unless you really crave it. If you do get bored easily, take a break. Trade off with your exercises and other pieces. Do your musical textbook studies, because it is all practicing, and sometimes does more good than just learning where to place your fingers on the strings. So to continue, if your arm gets stiff and you begin sawing, put your violin down and practice with your pencil. In fact, practice with your pencil anytime you can. Learn how to eat with your left hand and hold your pencil in your right. Take your pencil on walks. Use it while watching television. But even if you have excuses that cannot be cured, and even if it's just for this one lesson, see what it feels like to become completely obsessed with music and playing the violin. Because it is simply amazing how your mind opens up and you can discover things that others can only dream of. So eat it, drink it, breathe it, sing it. Because, contrary to popular belief, it is possible to practice effectively up to 17 hours a day. It's definitely not for everyone, but it is possible. And don't let anyone ever tell you that you can't. Because every last virtuoso who has ever lived has at one time or another become completely obsessed. So, practice, practice, and more practice until you remove every flaw. But never forget to add flavor, flavor, and more flavor before you're through. Once you have acquired the emotions and mastered the techniques, you must be willing to stand on stage, lose every inhibition that you have ever had, and act. Yes, like the actors and actresses in Hollywood. But there's more to it than that. It's the ability to skillfully share who you are deep inside, and then have the audience embrace it. This lesson can become uncomfortable for some, but to help put everything in perspective, I will quote my master. For it is far less personal to stand on stage under the spotlight, stark naked, than it is to bare your soul through your music. Yes, you can still be a humble religious saint off stage. In fact, I encourage it. But to be a virtuoso, you must be willing to bare your soul and play the part that the music demands. For many students, this acting is as simple as practicing good posture and delivering a performance with confidence. But for others, it can require a complete transformation. After being a student of this lesson myself, and yes, my wife does have a picture that will not be shown on the internet, the importance of losing your inhibitions and acting was really driven home to me the first time I was asked to be a judge at a violin competition. I later discovered that it's an ongoing game with some judges, and that most judges do practice it, even if they won't admit it. It's to have each contestant's scorecard completely filled out and tallied before the first note is ever played. The amazing thing is how many times the scores don't change. And rightfully so. Why? Because, like it or not, how you act is half of your performance, and it does affect the music. Some of the acting lessons at the Romantic School of Music are legendary. Others simply eye-opening, and they are limitless. They have to be, because each student's needs are so different, and their desires for success can run so deep. We've started videotaping some of the lessons, but for now, let me name the most common ones. Of course, there's posture and confidence, as well as the ability to relax in front of a hostile audience. There's elegance and sophistication, especially for the men, and especially for women, there's the ability to smile pleasantly, regardless of how you feel. And yes, there are snakes and spiders, high explosives, and much, much more. Because no matter how technically perfect your performance might be, in order to tease them, to taunt them, and slap them in the face, you must dig deep within yourself and learn how to act. And in order to then heal them, soothe them, and make passionate love to them, all while standing 50 feet away on a bright hardwood stage, you must become like Jane Seymour in Somewhere in Time, while describing the man of her dreams. And even with all of this, if you do wish to succeed as a virtuoso, you must. I've been criticized from almost the very beginning for my high praise of Lindsey Stirling. Yet consider this: who is today the most influential violinist in the world? Why? Because it's who she is, and she has set the stage. And believe it or not, the same rules apply to the most strictly educated classical violinist. And just like acting, setting the stage can make or break your performances. And it includes everything: your picture on the advertising, your reputation, the instrument you play, the venue, the stage itself, the acoustics of the hall, the lighting, the paintings on the walls that people see as they walk in, the color of the drapes, your attire, your expression, how you walk, how you talk, how long you make the audience wait, and how you greet the crowd after your performance. Yet sometimes, one special item can almost do it all and make the public take notice. In fact, to this day, most people remember Liberace simply by his flamboyant style and the candelabras he placed on his pianos. At some point, you will also need a trademark, something that helps set the stage and sets you apart. In my case, I am a master luthier, and the song I have chosen for this lesson is about a gypsy. May I introduce Becka Pearce, just returned from her tour of Rome and Orvieto. So choose nothing from this lesson or everything. Practice any way you like, for as little or as long as you desire. But always use everything you have to set the stage and bring the music to life. And then, before you're through, surprise the audience with something special, something that they would never dream of.